Hey everybody, so I'm just commenting on another sweltering hot rings workout. This one was pretty good. I was feeling very strong. This is the first rings workout I had done after getting back from traveling through the country, and it felt really good. I had been doing a lot of calisthenics while I was gone, but not any rings work, and so it always feels a little bit different. I've been focusing on pistol squats. Here I'm training the side lever, also known as the human flag. Well, not really fully training it. I've just basically been training my body to get into that position. I'm a big fan of just getting as close as possible when it comes to isometric skills and then just like hammering that position. I think that for me personally, when it comes to just pure skill acquisition like that, like repetition and frequency is way more important. So I usually do very low reps um, on a daily basis, but then on a weekly basis, my frequency is pretty high. And so that allows me to kind of acquire the skill more quickly without getting too much fatigue. Sorry if you hear a cat in the background. I've got a cat clamoring for attention. Ow, don't kneel on my stomach. I was doing a little bit of the lower volume type day, just focusing on maintaining strength. I'm starting a little bit of a slow cut, basically just trying to lose a half pound a week. In the past, I've done more aggressive cuts, but I find that my energy just really dips after a few weeks. And so I've been experimenting with doing a slower, more gradual cut to see if I can maintain my training quality. But besides that, I'm not doing super high volume because I'm, training for probably doing a bike trip through most of Maine, a bike packing trip, which is similar to one I had done 2 years ago through Pittsburgh to DC. And so I want to make sure that the majority of my working volume is pretty focused on cardio and endurance work. I've also been reading up on high rocks, that strength endurance sport that is recently gaining popularity in the US. And I think that there's a lot of interesting things that a lot of interesting ideas are coming out of that, particularly things talking about, compromised running, stuff like that. I really like the idea of doing a strength workout and then weaving cardio into it more organically. I think one that is just a time efficiency thing. And then I also am able to get a better experience of what it's going to be like doing a bike packing trip. For those of you who haven't done one of those trips before, it's not really continuous biking. It's just you bike for an hour, you stop for 10 minutes, you bike for an hour, you stop for 10 minutes. But the overall volume is very intense. And so you need to be able to have your body adapt to starting and stopping again and being able to bike when you're way under recovered and very fatigued, which is a completely different experience than when you're just training cardio fresh. It's funny, I actually used to do a lot of this where I would do strength training and then do the cardio at the end because I find that, at least for me, and this is just a good tip for hybrid athletes, usually if you're going to have to do both in the same day, obviously ideally you don't do it, but if you're either training for an event that combines strength and cardio and you kind of need to build that specific work capacity, or if you just don't really have the time to separate those things very clearly for whatever reason, depending on your goals, I think it's really useful to start with the strength work, like the higher intensity work, and then do the majority of your cardio. You can always do a little bit of cardio, as a warm up. Like I biked to this location, as you can see from the bike in the background, but it wasn't the majority of my work, which the majority of my work I do is after I'm done with my kind of conditioning work. It was hot as hell today. That's kind of the norm. I actually went to this location just because there's a little bit more shade and water fountains, and hopefully, I was hoping that that would make more of an impact than it did. However, I did feel very strong. I'm trying to work into a tuck to tuck shoulder stand here. I don't really feel like I've quite got the position yet. The strength is there, but the balance is not. There's just a coordination aspect. Whenever you're trying out a new ring skill, there's just a lot of trial and error and troubleshooting you have to go into. I also think I just gassed out my pressing muscles. Like my dips are really, that range of motion is not what I'm looking for ideally. And then doing some targeted tricep accessory work. I'm a huge fan of accessory work for calisthenics. The triceps are really the one muscle group where even if you're training hard with the rings, you do grow your triceps. Don't get me wrong. You can build very strong triceps. There's a lot of, gymnasts that you see that have very well developed triceps. But relative to the amount of work that your arm flexors are getting, your forearms, your biceps, your brachialis, brachioradialis, they're not quite getting the same stimulus, just relatively speaking. And so I always like to add a little bit of extra pressing work. I think that the triceps, at least for me, with my leverages, are always the linchpin of pressing strength. When my triceps are really strong, my pressing is really strong. If I lag behind and I rely too much on, my shoulder girdle or my pecs or whatever, I'm just really not a very efficient presser. I think the triceps are really an underrated muscle. They're definitely a workhorse of the upper body, and doing a little bit of accessory work will go a long way towards improving your pressing ability overall. Here I'm just messing a little bit with hangs. One thing I like about when I come back from traveling is I have a different perspective on my training, and so I try things out a little bit differently. I felt like I have a fresh mindset after seeing a lot of the people, in New York, Indiana, etc. Well, there weren't really any people training in Indiana, but the people in New York definitely gave me a lot of good ideas. I didn't film any of the times I was in a park where I was actually conversing with somebody, but I really enjoyed getting to talk with people. I always get excited when I see other people doing calisthenics. There's just really not a lot where I live. And with the internet, the beauty of the internet is that you have more access to this information. But the one downside of the internet is I think that it kind of erodes that fitness community. Like, I think 10, 15 years ago, if you were doing calisthenics, you probably would have run into the other people doing it just because they would have had to be at the same spots and getting information from the same sources, training in the same areas. But now with the internet, everyone can kind of silo themselves off to a certain degree. It's a weird trade-off. Like, I think overall the internet is good for training. If you're a reasonably knowledgeable person, you're going to learn a lot more. Like, I massively have benefited from, the internet. Like, I wouldn't know even 10% of what I do about training. I wouldn't be nearly as strong as I am if it weren't for that source of free information. Here's where you can see the Hyrox is really creeping in. I basically was doing a little bit of a simulation of it, except without the running. I was just biking instead. I love biking and burpees. I've found out this is the first time I've actually ever tried it, but I always find with my burpee workouts, you do get a lot of lower body stimulus, don't get me wrong, but relative to the upper body and core work, it's just not quite the same amount. So I always like to do something that is hitting my legs a little bit more. Usually it's lunges like this, the jumping lunges, or I'll do some duck walks, penetration lunges, some broad jumps, just something to add to that additional stimulus. Especially when it comes to calisthenics training, volume is key for developing your legs. I think there's a misconception that you can't build any leg muscle mass or any strength or power from leg training with calisthenics. You absolutely can, but because you're working with such low loads relative to the strength of your legs, you really have to be strategic in how you do it. And I find that the people that seem to have the best leg development from mostly bodyweight training are the ones who are adding that kind of strength endurance component where they can really get a pump and develop some hypertrophy as a side effect. I think the best examples are people like, the Pehlwan wrestlers, Iron Wolf, a lot of those burpee guys. They have pretty decent leg development, pretty good quads and leg power, because no matter what you do, when you get hundreds of reps in, it's just going to make a big difference in your body physiologically. I realized fairly recently that a lot of the whole Mark Ripito, whatever strength curve thing that I was taught years ago is a little bit of a less nuanced take than the reality that it comes to adaptations. You can still get strength adaptations at high reps. You just have to make sure that your technique is very good, and you're not going to get the same efficiency. Like, you have to think about what you're training for. It's not the fastest way to build strength, but you're still progressively overloading in one way or the other. If you're still reducing your rest times, if you're still making the leverage more challenging, if you're gaining muscle mass and having to move extra muscle mass around, you still are progressively overloading to a degree. So it's not that it won't do anything, it's just that it's not necessarily the fastest way to get to those results. But honestly, in my case, I don't worry too much about strength and mass. I'm way larger than the average calisthenics athlete, and I think even when I lean out, hopefully, assuming the cut goes well, which I think it will be doing, good things for my body. People actually believe that I do calisthenics. I get a lot of videos where I think people assume that I'm all fat, which is a little insulting, I'm not going to lie. But I do understand that I have a belly from, classes and commuting and eating way too much Wendy's. You guys will know when I get, a big fancy job and can afford kale because I'm going to be ripped as hell. Anyways, this workout was really grueling. I'm not showing all of my biking workouts because unless you have a GoPro and you're going through really scenic areas, I don't think biking is super interesting to watch. I just did a little bit of I guess you could call it an interval. Really, it's more of like I saw High Rocks videos and I thought that was an interesting idea. And then this is me changed into my biking outfit. So this is all the same workout. I just had biked trails for a long time. And then I went to do a little bit of extra work. I keep the lower intensity work for the end. It's very important when you're selecting exercises. It's not just the exercises you select on that given day. It's the order of what you do things. You need to prioritize high intensity and high skill movements first, particularly if they're both high intensity and high skill demands, because you just need to be fresh when you're trying to develop those skills. But something like this, where I have more than enough strength to hammer out a pistol squat or do dips, although I was too tired to do much for the dips, but it did pop my back, which felt good. This is probably the most truly hybrid of workouts that I've done of late. It feels really good though. I like to prioritize endurance when it comes to the summer, just because I tend to be doing a lot more outdoors activities and it just makes more sense. I'm definitely an athlete that's predisposed more to strength and power, and so I think it's important to attack those weaknesses. And speaking to anybody who's predominantly a strength and power athlete out there, I really implore you to at least do a bit of basic cardio. You're really going to get so much benefit out of attacking your weaknesses and building up your base of cardio, building up your base of endurance. Don't just be a one-trick pony. Everything is going to contribute to your overall fitness and your health and longevity. People don't often think of endurance training as training to make your body more resistant to fatigue, but that's the main benefit to hybrid athletes because fatigue is a universal.